As the state's leading property and casualty insurance trade association, the Wisconsin Insurance Alliance plays a crucial role in safeguarding Wisconsinites. Alliance members provide vital insurance coverage, ensuring financial protection for individuals, businesses, and communities across the state. In times of need, they act as a reliable resource, helping residents recover from unforeseen events. Ultimately, the Wisconsin Insurance Alliance and its members contribute to the resilience and well-being of Wisconsin families and businesses by offering essential protection and support. WisI video of the WisPolitics Madison Luncheon series at the Madison Club is made possible with sponsorship support from the Wisconsin Insurance Alliance.
Okay, everybody, hi, welcome. All right, the program is about to begin. So, everybody, I'm Jeff Maris from WisPolitics.com, here with another WisPolitics Luncheon at the Madison Club. I broke my rule. My summer rule is don't do events in August, and now this is our second one in August, so I don't know what that means. The event planner will need to be reprimanded. That's me. Okay. So, first of all, I want to thank all our sponsors that make these events possible. Hush Blackwell Strategies, been with us since the beginning under some different names. American Family Insurance, XL Energy, Walmart, ARP Wisconsin, and Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield. Plus, the Wisconsin Insurance Alliance is sponsoring the video of this event, which will be at Wisconsin Eye later in the day, probably 6-ish. So let's hear it for those sponsors, everybody. So upcoming events, WisPolitics events, August 20th, that's next week. We're doing a virtual event on the legislative primaries and how that sets up for the fall. That's a virtual event. September 10th, we're doing a dual book signing at another location, Cooper's Tavern, because they were all full here, with Tim Cullen and Tom Loftus, two former legislative leaders who have written not a book together, but two different books that are being published this fall, and we'll have a conversation with them about their political history and politics in general. September 26th, we're going to have a program here on AI and state regulation of AI. And then we have an event coming up on October 3, which isn't announced yet, and then we have our October 15th polling summit here. So make sure you attend every single one of those things. I'm keeping score. And that's all the time we have for today. Sorry, that was just one long commercial. That's what we do here. Okay, no. All right, so now we're going to greet our guest today, Eric Hovde. He's the winner in yesterday's primary for the GOP nomination for U.S. Senate. So let's hear it for Eric Hovde. Okay, you ready to roll?
I'm ready to roll.
Okay, so news of the day. I want to start talking about the economy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there's a good inflation number today. Do you view it as a good inflation number? Are you satisfied with how these numbers are tracking?
Look, the rate of inflation is without question coming down. But you got to remember, if we calculated inflation like we did in the early 1980s or 1970s, we probably had a bout of inflation of 40% instead of 22%.
Explain.
Okay, so probably the biggest component of that in the CPI numbers. CPI is Consumer Price Index. There's two big inflation indexes, Producer Price Index, Consumer Price Index. CPI is what got reported this morning. The biggest component of CPI is housing costs. And back in the 80s, they changed something from measuring the prices of homes to going to something called owner's equivalent rent. And what is owner's equivalent rent? It's a survey over a 6-month time frame asking people who own homes what they think they can rent their homes for. So owner's equivalent rent was still a little bit sticky. My guess is it's probably a little softer, so I think the overall inflation number is probably a little softer than what it's even showing. But if you would have gone back and when housing values were surging like that 2 and a year ago, then I would say that's just one area on how it's understated inflation. The bigger issue is we're not getting a pullback in prices. And this is where people get lost on this topic. They say, well, inflation is coming down. The rate of prices going up is coming down, but prices have not come down. We have basically devalued people's purchasing power by 22% in a 3.5-year time frame. Now, that has been very significant for Americans because real wages, this is real wages, so your wage increases adjusted for the rate of inflation have been actually negative for a 3-year period. Even during the great financial recession, we only had real wages go down for a 2-year period. So when you ask the American public, are we in recession? Over 50% of Americans say yes, they are in recession. Why? Because they are in recession.
I mean, they feel like they're in a recession because their earning power has been undermined.
100%. And look, you've got a lot of distortions in the economy. If you look at the manufacturing sector, it's really been in recession for about 18, 19 months. The best indicator for that is the U.S. Purchasing Manufacturer Index, and then you got the Service Sector Index. The manufacturing sector index has been in contraction for 19 months. So we probably entered into a recession for manufacturing companies, a year and a half ago. The service sector has bouncing just above 50. 50 is the break even. If you're under 50, you're in contraction. If you're above 50, you're in expansion. That has come down. It's bumping right along the 50 level. Now, the thing that is keeping the economy from a GDP number up is all the spending. Everybody can drive around the city and see all the roads being ripped up. What happened? Well, part of the bills that President Biden passed when they spent all that money was transferred over to the states and meant to be spent in 2023 and 24. Why? It's politics. Because they wanted to have the economy as pumped up as much as possible for his reelection. The problem is they ignited such a bout of inflation that they're cratering the consumer. And the other big dynamic is when you spend $1 by the government, you get less than $1 in return. That has been studied by economists for a long time. When you spend $1 in the private sector, you get more than $1 in return. So they sucked so much money into the public sector that it's actually hurt the private sector, but most importantly, it ignited inflation, and that is what's breaking the consumer back.
Okay, so you think we're in a recession now?
I think we are on the verge, or we may look back here. You know, recessions, they never know when they start until you're probably 6 to 9 months into a recession. That's why you'll always have the group of economists that start the date. It's always, 9 months later they go back and say, well, it started at this date. I think we are either in it or very close or heading into it. And there were some interesting consumer data numbers that came out in the past 2 weeks, and they were horrible. 10% of all credit card balances are 90 days plus delinquent. We haven't seen that level since the Great Financial Recession. If you look at auto loan delinquency rates and default rates, they are skyrocketing. They're heading back to the Great Financial Recession levels. Student loan debt is opposite because they've done so much forgiveness, so you can't really predict based on that. Mortgage debt delinquencies are starting to tick up. So if you look at the consumer credit data, it's not looking good. And then the last piece of that pie is if you listen to the second quarter earnings out of most of the big consumer products companies, every single one of them said the consumer is weakening. There's a lot of strain. And so, yes, I think we're probably heading into recession.
Well, the consumer has been, keeping the economy going here. So, but if the Fed cuts rates in September, will that not stave off recession? Do you not think that is a good move?
Those are two different questions.
Okay. Answer one, and then answer the other.
Yeah. Is it a good move? Look, a lot of people, and the Fed typically doesn't get involved in cutting rates 6 months, raising or cutting rates 6 months before election. They're going to do something that they typically don't do. I think it probably is the right move. However, do I think that will stave off a recession? No. Look, go back to the great financial recession. The Fed was cutting and cutting and cutting rates, and the economy just kept rolling. More often than not, they get behind the curve, and it's not all about interest rates. Look at housing prices. Yeah, will rates coming down help with affordability? Sure, but housing prices have gotten so high. Most people, young people, do not have the money to put up to get the mortgage to afford that house. If consumers had taken on too much debt over the last 4 or 5 years, okay, the cut in interest costs may help at the margin, but it's not going to change the equation.
Okay, so what about housing affordability? What do you think should be done to help? Can government help with housing affordability other than the Fed cutting rates?
Oh, God, government has made housing affordability very difficult. They are a big contributing problem to housing affordability. National Association of Builders estimates the cost of a new home to construct 25 to 30% is tied into taxes, impact fees, and regulations. I'm going to give you an example, because I think people have to understand this. In this city, housing affordability has become so difficult. First of all, as somebody who understands the development business quite well, if we own land and we want to take, let's just call it 100 acres to make it simple, and divide that into lots and then put housing on it, whether we build the single-family housing or we sell it to a home builder, a production home builder. In the old days, we would just tie that 100 acres into city sewer and water. Okay? All of a sudden, the city, and this started happening 10, 15 plus years ago, they first layer over you all these kind of impact fees, park fees, this fees, that fees. But then secondly, they've said, no, now you got to remediate the water that's running off the roofs that you're going to put on this 100 acre of land on that site itself. So now we're going to have to take out, call it 5 acres out of that 100 acres. We're going to have to build a big retention pond and then feed that water, that comes out of that into city sewer and water. Well, what has that done? Okay, you've taken out 5 acres. That 5 acre cost gets transferred to the now other 95 acres. Then the cost of building that retention pond gets added to the cost of that land. All land developers and builders are going to do is just transfer on the cost.
So government's the problem, not the solution for housing affordability. So
government is a huge part of the problem.
So could government do in terms of regulation that would you want them to back off on all those environmental regulations?
Well, they're not all environmental regulations. And look, I'm not by any means a person that believes we don't operate with any regulations, but the amount of regulations that has been put on business, and you can look at it directly as it relates to housing, and the impact fees and all the fees and the costs and the time it takes to go through. If you're putting up money, there's a time value to money. This is just the reality of business. So do we want to have affordable housing or not? It's that simple. There's going to be trade-offs. And if you don't want housing to be affordable, then continue down the path that we've been going. But if you want to make housing more affordable, you have to promote people or allow them to go do what they want to do and not choke them with regulation and time. I don't even want to get into it because I'm in the heart of the belly of the beast, trying to get land, and we own a lot of land on the east side and I have for a long time, trying to go get land developed in this city to turn into single-family housing takes years. And if I would have stepped back in time 20, 30, 40 years ago, it would have taken a fraction of that time and a fraction of that cost. That's just reality.
Okay, so I go through all this because economy should be an issue in this election, right? And so you're saying that the economy is not as good as the numbers appear, and that, or you know, what's your major beef about the economy? Because Democrats are going to say, well, we whipped inflation now, and interest rates are coming down, and you will say,
the way you phrase that, you've whipped inflation. You haven't brought prices back down. Again, it's the rate of prices going up have come down. Prices haven't come down. Go to the grocery store. Go look at your food costs. If you have an old bill, go look at the price of foods, eggs. Go to the meat section. Look at how expensive fish, poultry, chicken, or red meat is. How about this one? Look at your auto insurance bills. Have you seen what your auto insurance bill or your homeowner insurance bill looks like? Look at the price of housing. So they haven't defeated inflation. These prices are embedded into the system. And again, when you have over 50% of Americans saying they're in a recession, well, you can try to spin and, you're not in recession. But yes, they are in recession. And now we have the labor markets weakening significantly. And you're seeing even more announcements of layoffs coming. I don't care whether it's Intel, Paramount. I mean, you can just run through the different companies that have announced mass layoffs that are going to unfold here over the next 3 to 4 months.
okay, so how does this rank in terms of the potent issue that you need to win in November? Is the economy the number one, or where does it rank?
When you look at polling today.
Yeah, not the polling. What do you think?
Oh, there's no question.
Okay.
It's because I'm out there speaking to people every day. I mean, the amount of people I've interfaced with over the last 7 months, are thousands upon thousands of people. I'm talking to people every day. It is without question the economy. And you can define that as jobs, you can define that as inflation, overall economic growth. So that is the biggest issue. After that, the second biggest issue that people talk to me about is the border and all the consequences around the border. I call it the rotten onion, and the reason why I call it a rotten onion, because like an onion, there's many layers to this open border. Do you want me to go through those layers, or do you
No, but the number, there were just some new numbers reported in the past couple of days from the border authorities that say that the number of arrests is way down, like 30%. So does that not mean progress to you? I guess?
Well, when you brought in anywhere from a minimum of 10 million, and most sheriffs on the southern border will say that number is more like 13 to 16 million people, and now they're saying because the political blowback has been so big, now we're going to slow down the flow of people. That's kind of like saying, inflation has come down. Well, you already ignited the inflation that's bearing people's economically. Well, no, you've brought in anywhere at a minimum of 10 million and potentially as high as 16 million illegal immigrants into this country. Period. They're here. And so you're I'll go through what the layers of this onion are.
How thick is this onion? Because we only have an hour.
No, I can move through the onion.
Well, how about a small? How about a small?
I'll move through it pretty quickly, but they're all very important issues. First of all, we all know we have a housing, access to housing issue in this country, and an access to health care in this country. Well, when you bring 10 to 13, 16 million, whatever that number is, you're just compounding that problem of providing affordable housing and health care. And by the way, one thing that the Democratic Party does not seem to understand is that there is no such thing as a free lunch. I'll say that again. There is no such thing as a free lunch. When you have whatever that number of illegals that come in that use our health care system, and they're not paying into it, that cost gets transferred. Where does that cost get transferred to? All of us. And it's either through higher medical bills, or higher health insurance costs. And when you see your renewal rates, not this coming year, but the next 2 coming years, you're going to see another meaningful jump in your health care costs because of this issue. So that's the first layer. The second layer is the crime issue. There is no question, and it was every single week you were having those devastating stories. The press has started not to talk about these stories as much, of all the crime that is unfolded. And I don't care whether it's the 12-year-old girl in Houston that was raped and strangled and thrown in the river, the mother of 5 out for a jog in Maryland. You could go on, the 2 different women in New York, the young girl in Athens, Georgia, where my older daughter went to school, and Athens was always a very safe place. The illegal immigrant who killed his own 2 children here 2 weeks ago. It has ignited a crime problem. And we know, without a question of doubt, that Venezuela emptied their jail cells and their psych wards into America. How do we know that? Because I've asked that question many times. How do you know that? And the sheriffs on the southern border will tell you they can see the prison tattoos and the gang tattoos. So, and that's the exact same thing that Castro did during the Mariel boat lift. Now let me get to another really important layer of this onion.
This is thicker than I thought.
Well, let me get to it because it's critical.
Okay.
The fentanyl crisis. This is probably one of the most devastating crises this country has ever seen, and the amount of press coverage and the lack of action by Washington has been stunning. We lost 108,000 Americans last year, 112,000 the year before. We've been losing 100,000 largely young people every year to this poison. That poison gets created in China. It gets shipped to the drug cartels in Mexico, brought up over our southern border. And a lot of people assume that the people that are dying are chronic drug users. Yes, some of them are. But a large percent of them are not. There are young people that are ordering pills online, a Percocet, Adderall, a Xanax. My 25-year-old daughter has known 5 people in her age range that have died of this. I spoke to parents that lost their son 3 days after Christmas, hurt his back, spent Christmas with him, came back here to Madison, good job, as a manager at a chain, and hurt his back, ordered a Percocet online, and it was laced with fentanyl. He died. Now, I want to put this in context for everybody. During the Vietnam War that, went on for 19 years, major conflict for 7, 8 years, we lost 58,000 largely young American men. Our college campuses were in protests, and the press wrote nothing but about that war. And here we're losing almost double that every single year, and nothing has been done about it. And I've got my competitor saying she's done something. She has done absolutely zero.
Okay, so
Zero.
So the bill that passed the bipartisan bill that passed the Senate and then Trump intervened, that wasn't going to help the issue?
Oh, wait, you've got me.
No. I mean, this is
wait.
But I mean,
what bill are you talking about?
Well, this is the bill that the border control bill that was advanced, the bipartisan border control bill, and then Trump intervened and said he didn't want it to pass.
That bill had no chance of passing. The House wasn't even going to touch it, and most senators weren't going to touch it. You can listen to Ron Johnson. That had no chance.
So would it have helped?
No, because it wasn't going to deal with any of the significant issues.
Okay.
And let's just put that whole line of nonsense away. Under President Trump, and I'm not, here to walk through, all aspects of the presidential race because they're going to litigate that. But the last year of President Trump's term in president, there was only 300,000 border crossings. President Biden immediately removed stay in Mexico, section, I think it was 42, section 8, a whole series of different things that just poured the amount of illegals that came into the country. To think that this bill that was a couple senators negotiating with Joe Biden and wasn't getting at the heart. It wasn't going to keep stay in Mexico. It wasn't going to do anything about that. Wasn't going to get at the structural issues to illegal immigration. All it was codifying how many illegals could come in every year.
Okay, so if that bill wasn't the answer, what is the answer?
You close the border. There's three steps to it. First of all, you start going after China and use economic sanctions against them to force them to start going after the producers of these chemicals in China. And you're going to have to use, a variety of tasks to hold China accountable. Because if China wanted to make this go away, it'd go away that fast. They have all the controls they want, and if China wants something to go away, they just start hanging and killing people, which is how they take care of problems in China. So you've got to hold China accountable. Then you've got to close the southern border. You have to go after the drug cartels. And then you have to stiffen sentencing significantly for anybody that is lacing our pharmaceuticals with fentanyl. You are killing people. It should be right there up with, how we would treat somebody who murders somebody. And if you took those steps, you would, I think, fairly rapidly decline the amount of fentanyls flooding our streets.
Okay, so do you agree with Trump on mass deportation?
Do I believe that we need to start deporting a number of people? Yes. I think to think we're ever going to deport 10 to 16 million people would be impossible.
Well, that wouldn't help our economy.
No. Okay. But let's be honest. I'm a believer in legal immigration. I think we have to fix our legal immigration process. I think our legal immigration process is an absolute farce. We make it so difficult. If somebody wants to try to come here legally, they should be given a time frame of which they're going to get an up and down answer. Yes, you have a prospect of coming into this country, or no, you don't have a prospect of coming in. And then if you do, here are the requirements, and this is the next timeline, so you know how you're tracking in that legal immigration process. Our legal immigration process is fundamentally broken, so we've got to fix that. And we have to close the illegal immigration process.
Okay,
and then when you start with dealing with deportation, you should immediately, anybody who has committed any type of crime in this country or has past criminal records should immediately be deported out of this country.
Right, so increased deportation, not mass deportation.
How you define that, all the rest. I'm just talking practical reality. It's going to be exceptionally difficult to find everybody, but you prioritize risk, and that's how you go about handling this issue. Okay,
so another issue that shows up is the abortion issue, and as soon as you entered the race, Democrats were on that issue right away. Just for my benefit, explain your stance, your current stance on abortion.
I've been very clear about my stance since I've announced, or even before I announced. It's been put back to the states to resolve. So I believe we Wisconsinites need to resolve this issue with a common sense and compassionate approach to a woman that is in that tough spot. How do we do that? I think we do it through a referendum. Everybody will have their vote. I'll have my vote. You'll all have your vote. Now, how would I vote on that? Well, I believe in the beauty of life. I have 2 daughters, and I have 3 grandchildren. So, I want to see less abortions. However, I agree with exceptions. I've always agreed with exceptions for rape, incest, and the life of the mother. And I agree that early on in a woman's pregnancy, she should have a right to choose. But there comes a point where a baby can be born healthy and alive that it's unconscionable we're thinking of terminating that child's life.
So what's the weak Is it 20 weeks? Is it 16 weeks? What's the week that you want?
It's not for me to sit here and pick out a week, but I will tell you Western Europe and most of Europe resolved this decades ago. And if you look at most of Western Europe, I think Germany's 12 weeks, France is 14 weeks, the Netherlands 18 weeks. It's somewhere in that first trimester time frame or the very beginning of the second trimester. And I think that's where most people, from what I've seen, most people settle in at some point along that timeline.
All right. If this came up in the U.S. Senate and there was a national abortion ban, would you vote for it?
It's a event that will never, ever happen. And let me explain. When politicians start talking to you about things like a national abortion ban, they're lying to you. Why are they lying to you? Because the only way that will ever happen at the federal level is one party's going to have to control the presidency, the House of Representatives by a fair margin, and they're going to have 60 Senate seats. Okay? Because otherwise the other side will use the filibuster to block it. So it's never going to happen. It's been put back to the states. I believe the states should resolve it. I just shared with you, I think it's the voters. Why did the Supreme Court overturn Roe v. Wade? It's very clear. Because it's not the judge's decision to make law. It's lawmakers' responsibility to make law. And it's the people's responsibility to vote for those people that make law. It's not for a court. They're just supposed to interpret the law. So it's back to the states. The state needs to come to a solution. Many states are moving forward. Some have taken very extreme left positions, like Minnesota, that will allow a baby to be terminated up to the point of birth. And other states have settled in on different weeks. I think Ohio just resolved theirs, I think, at 20 weeks. Florida's at 6 weeks, and there's a variety of states somewhere in between.
So you're okay with various states having various laws, and if a woman needs an abortion and her state doesn't provide it, then she'd have to travel for the abortion?
Well, okay, let's be honest on that. The vast majority of abortions today are done through the day after pill. So the reality is most abortions are handled and you're getting medication delivered online.
And you're okay with the preservation of the use of the pill,
Well, look, you're not changing that. We can all talk in theory. Let's just talk in reality. You're not changing that. That pill will be around, and just like hard narcotics transfer from state to state or from other countries into our countries, medications move all over our country, and that's just reality.
Okay. So now I want to talk about politics. All right. So you didn't think we weren't talking about, but we were talking about issues. Okay. So congratulations on winning the primary.
Thank you.
That was yesterday.
That was yesterday, and now it's today, and it's off to the general.
Okay, so you were expected to get through anyway. But, so, I mean, it's basically been a Baldwin-Hovde race for months. Things have changed so much recently. I'm wondering whether you think what's happened recently is helping or hurting you on the path to victory. In terms of Biden exiting, Harris coming on board, Democrats appear to be united. You know, at the RNC, Republicans were very united coming out of the RNC, and now sort of how's that affecting you?
Look, the top of the ticket, the presidential race, without question, is going to have an influence on down ballot races. My Senate race, congressional races, state legislative races. That's, again, a reality. Yes, I think most Democrats were shocked when they saw the performance of Joe Biden in that first debate. I wasn't surprised by it at all. I could pick up the signs of dementia three and a half years ago. Unfortunately, my mother had Alzheimer's the last 11 years of her life, and my wife and I were the primary caregivers of my mother, and I can see the signs in a nanosecond on somebody who has dementia. So, look, they made their move. They didn't do it in a very democratic way by anointing her in that position. But now we have Kamala Harris. I hope she gets out and starts doing some press. They're trying to do the same strategy that they did with Joe Biden during COVID, running him from the basement. I don't think that's going to last through this whole time frame. She flamed out when she was in the presidential race. She didn't even get through the first Iowa caucus. She did so poorly. Let's face it, she can turn a series of sentences into a word salad very quickly. So I don't think she's a very strong candidate. I don't think her choice of Governor Walz has been helpful at all to them in the state of Wisconsin. There's a lot of Minnesotans that have left Minnesota because they didn't like what Governor Walz was doing. So they've got their ticket.
So you don't see that as much effect on your race at all, because rarely does the winner of the U.S. Senate race differ from which party wins.
No, I said I think there's going to be an influence, but I think as this campaign wears on, I think people are going to get to understand how extremely liberal, Vice President Harris is. I mean, she was voted the #1 most liberal senator in the U.S. Senate, and some of her positions are just crazy, absolutely crazy. So I think that's going to come out. She's trying to switch on almost everything. So you're telling me your positions for the last 30 years, what you've voted on, what you've stood for, what you've repeated multiple times, now you're doing a wholesale change on? I don't think it's going to work. So my guess is, let's see how it plays out. They're going to get another bump around the Democratic National Convention, but then I think the heart of the campaign is going to start settling in, and I think some luster is going to be lost. And, we'll see.
Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think there's been a poll that showed you ahead in this race yet, right?
No.
Okay, does that disappoint you? Does that make you feel like you need to do something different? Or
No, God, no. I mean, I am going up against somebody who has spent their entire life in politics. I mean, since Tammy Baldwin graduated college, Dane County Board of Supervisors, Assembly, Congress for, 14 or 16 years, and now the U.S. Senate. So my name ID had to come way up. The fact that I'm sitting anywhere from the internal polls that we're looking at 2 points down to 5 points down at this point in time. I mean, remember, Ron Johnson in 2022 was 7 points down on September 1st. He was 12 points down in 2016 on September 1st. So the fact that I am, in a much better position than Ron Johnson was at either one of those periods of time, and I didn't have a brutal primary, I feel really good about where I am. And this, the heart of this campaign will now start getting litigated because people are tuning in. And and becoming much more conscious, and and at some point, Senator Baldwin is going to have to start doing some of this because she comes back, 6 months before election, makes her very structured, staged appearances. I can't tell you how many radio shows I do a week. I do more in a week than she'll do in a month or even 2 months. The amount of my access to the press. I've given myself complete access to everybody at the press. She rarely ever does that.
That means you're going to have to stay for like a half hour after to take all their questions.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, Ben.
But let's also, debates. Think of this.
Okay, so you're not happy with one debate, obviously. You proposed.
Wait.
How many did you propose, right?
Wait.
No, I'm just asking. How many did you propose? 3?
I'm going to get to that in a question. Are you happy that our Senate candidate is giving one debate when typically Senate races are at a minimum 3? How many debates I think we should have? It's very clear. I think we should have multiple debates. I think Senator Baldwin and I should debate in Milwaukee and Green Bay and Madison and Wausau Rhinelander, in La Crosse, and
Okay,
Eau
so
Claire.
there's going to be one debate, the
Yeah,
WBA.
at the very end of the election process.
Right.
And so, what should a campaign be about? It should be two people standing up in front of you, talking to you about your positions, where they stand, and how to make this country better and improve the lives of the people of Wisconsin. That's what politics should be about. Our political system is beyond broken today. Beyond broken. Because that's not what it's about. That's how our political system used to be run. Now it's, all you're doing is go raise money. She has a pipeline of money coming out of California. That's why she's made this silly nonsense attack about me being Californian, because she raises all her money in California and she spends most of her life in New York and D.C. And then you create ads making up stories. I cannot believe the degree of what...
The ad? So you're mad about the ads. You sued to take down an ad, right?
Every single ad, there's no basis for truth.
There's
no basis. Okay, so the one I'm suing for, she said, my bank took government money. My bank never took any government money. It's through a rigged system. The only thing they can cite is my development company using TIF money, which is the farthest thing from a rigged system. It's a very public system. And again, that's not my bank. I have offshore, what was it? Offshore tax havens. I have 0 offshore tax havens, and they have no basis for that. They cited some of my companies are based in Delaware. 70% of all corporate America is based in Delaware, not for tax reasons, for legal reasons. So that's the first one. How about the ad? How about the ad about me saying farmers are lazy? Have you all saw that one? Okay, I think farmers are the hardest working people in America. Did you see what I said? Did I say anything about farmers being lazy? There's no mention of that. I said farmers used to toil hard manually in the field to plow their fields, and then, because of advancements, they plow their fields with tractors. That's a true statement. No reflection on whether a farmer's lazy or not. Then they're attacking me about single mothers? I mean, are you kidding me? My wife's in the back. My wife was a single mother. I saw how hard she had to deal with that when we first met. I have homes in this city for single mothers. My foundation's just not all over the world rescuing street children and saving kids out of sex trafficking. I'm doing stuff. I fund more of the food banks and drug addiction crisis and things for single mothers in our own city. And they're literally attacking me, saying I'm against single mothers. I mean, you can't even make this stuff up. It's insanity.
Why haven't you sued to get those off the air if they're so bad?
Because I'm not going to sit and spend everything litigating. We're going to have to get out there in the message. You know what the big disappointment is? The press. Let's just be honest. If we were even 10 or 15,
I don't represent the entire press.
I'm not saying you do.
That's too big of a job.
If the press was even, the press always leaned a bit left, but they would at least write stories to hold the Democratic side accountable and call them out for being fictitious. You know what? I will give credit. Wisconsin State Journal actually wrote a fairly long article about what nonsense that farmer ad was. That was, I think, in the paper last week or 2 weeks ago, where they actually did that. But everybody here knows I'm not a Californian. I've never been a resident of the state of California 1 year in my life. And they've spent $5 or $6 million telling people I'm a Californian. Because I've been successful and I bought a bank in California. And by the way, I moved the headquarters of the bank out of California 4 years ago. I couldn't stand dealing with California politics. So, but again, you know that. All of you in the press know that. The Democratic Party knows exactly how much I pay in state income tax, because I couldn't even believe this, but In the state of Wisconsin, you can request the Wisconsin Department of Revenue what the net tax you pay in the state for your income tax. I was shocked that they can do that. But every day for like a month, my wife or I would get these envelopes for my different companies and for me personally, and it was the person requesting it was some gal's name from the Democratic Party.
Yeah, well,
So...
Yeah, I mean, that's allowed. I mean,
of course, I have no problem with it.
Well, okay.
The point is, everybody in this room and everybody in the press knows that was complete BS, and there was only 2 people that wrote and called them BS on it. Believe it or not, one was Dan Bice, and he did it in a very way where he said, I lost the bet to Eric after he ran in 2012.
Okay.
I thought he'd move back to the East Coast. He never did.
Yeah.
I lost the bet.
Okay.
And the only other one was John Nichols with the Cap Times, who said, Eric Hovde's family has extremely deep ties to this city. My mother knew his father well. But none of you have ever pointed any of these lies out. You're letting a sitting senator go about making one lie after another, and even on what she's accomplished.
Can't you combat that with your own ads that say exactly what you're saying here? You can.
I did one ad with a wall. How many of you have seen the ad where it's a wall of TVs and me going, I'm sure you've seen these ads, all these attack ads. Why is she doing this? Because, what does a career politician do when they're in trouble? They lie. And I walk through. But am I going to try to chase every single lie they're manufacturing? No. I'm not going to just be constantly on the defense. That's what they're trying to do.
Okay. I want to get to some audience questions, but we're talking about the ads and the enormous costs of the mostly broadcast ads. A good investment may have been a TV station in Wisconsin along the way.
I sure the heck wish I would have bought a couple TV stations.
But anyway,
a few years ago.
You spend about $13 million of your own money, right, so far, and so how much is it going to take? How much because it's a funny thing when rich people run for office and start self-funding, a lot of people don't want to give money. They think, well, they can take care of it. So, how much are you going to have to invest in this race to pull it off?
Look, I am not trying to self-fund this whole race because these races are absurdly expensive. She'll spend easily over $100 million on this race by all the different groups.
You mean her side, not just her campaign, her side.
Her side. And so...
And you guys are going to have to match that.
Well, I don't know if we can match them dollar for dollar, that's for sure. They have a pipeline, big tech, big pharma, big this, big that. Look, my second ad was, I'm not going to take corporate special interest money. Our political system is broken. It's become corrupted. So I'm not taking all that special interest money like she's taking. She's taking money from every special interest group known to man. So, yeah, and then she has a pipeline of donations coming out of New York and out of California. I mean, just look at where her money comes from. So, yeah, I'm trying to raise money. I'm making a big investment in my campaign, and hopefully some other groups that will be supportive of me get involved in this race at some point. But, yeah, it's a daunting task.
So, I mean, you're going to have to personally spend a lot more money than $13 million.
I don't know how much I'll spend, but I've made a commitment, but there's no way I'm going to be able to even come close to funding what they're putting in all their special interest money.
Okay, let's go to some audience questions. Got about 10 minutes. So, Jim. The question is, how do you see the healthcare game playing out for all of us?
Look, our healthcare system is teetering, and Obamacare, they said, was going to bring down the costs, and the cost of healthcare only skyrocketed higher. The other big problem is the access to care is collapsing. I got hit with AFib last October. Never had it, didn't even know what was going on. Got on my Peloton and was pedaling. All of a sudden, I couldn't do what I was, and I didn't know. Went to the office and finally called the doctor, and he said, "You better get to the emergency room right away." I tried to get into the system to get a medical test on my heart at the UW system. Do you know when I got my final appointment? They called me in June and said, "We're ready to get your test." Now, I had to get in a car and go drive over to Minnesota to go get a medical test.
So some things are good in Minnesota.
Yeah, it's called the Mayo Clinic.
I'm just saying.
It's called the Mayo Clinic, the best healthcare system. But no, I mean, and it's really sad. So there's a number of different flaws in Obamacare, and I don't have the time to dig into all of them, but one of the biggest ones was they thought by consolidating our healthcare system that would be beneficial. We all know UW Health ended up buying Meritor. They still keep Meritor's name, but it's a convoluted merger where UW Health now controls pretty much 80% of the healthcare in the MSA of Madison. Well, when you have that kind of control, you have no pricing competition. So the biggest thing we need back in our healthcare system is competition, desperately. Then we need price transparency. Now think, everything you go and buy in life, there's a price. You know what you're paying for it before you buy it. And yet, go try to find out when you go need a procedure. Whatever it is, your knee replace, this, that. Good luck. Call this 800 number. You'll spend 2-3 hours trying to get through, talk through, and then whatever price they give you, okay, it's not going to be the end price.
Okay, so let's two things here. So you want to break up all these mergers that have taken place under Obamacare? How would that happen?
I am not a fan of the massive consolidation within markets like we've allowed, and I don't understand at all, because I understand antitrust law pretty darn well. There's something called the HHI index, Heifman-Herfindahl index, and how you could have ever let one provider have that kind of market share. And of course you're going to whittle away. Do you understand?
No, but how would you break them up? Now that
that's the problem. Once that consolidation has happened, it would be very hard to undo it. So now you have to foster more competition coming into the market and encouraging, look, UW or Madison area really needs somebody like Ascension Health or another big player to come into this market. We really, let's all hope that another big hospital chain comes into this market.
Okay, let's go for another question. Jim, go ahead. Then we'll come back to you over here. Jim's with ARP if you haven't got that yet.
Yeah.
But anyway, caregivers and bolstering Social Security.
Look, we are going to become more and more dependent on caregivers as our society is aging and aging rapidly. I'm the last year of the baby boom generation, and I'm 60 years old. And so, the top year is 78. So we're going to have a healthcare crisis coming very fast, not just access and cost of care, but how are we going to deal with the amount of people that are aging rapidly? I don't have the specifics on how to do that, but your general sentiment of how we can help encourage family care or individual caregivers, because that is going to end up being the backbone of how to take care of a rapidly aging population.
Well, he mentioned tax credit. Would a tax credit help?
Well, I would have to look at tax credits, but there could be a variety of different mechanisms to try to support that. Secondly, as it pertains to Social Security, I am deeply worried. You talk about probably the biggest crisis we have. It's the debt crisis we're in. And the amount of money they spent, we got $35 trillion in debt. We've got interest costs on our debt is $1 trillion a year right now. That's bigger than our Defense Department budget. Within 1 year's time, unless rates come way down, it's going to be bigger than the cost of Social Security. We have put Social Security and a lot of very important programs at great jeopardy. CBO, Congressional Budget Office, came out 2 weeks ago saying Social Security will be bankrupt in less than 10 years, going cash flow negative. So we have to shore up government finances so that's not put at risk. Now, it may be something like somebody like me who doesn't need it. I've been successful enough that, you know, I'll sacrifice my Social Security so to make sure other people will have it. But
so you're okay on means testing then?
Well, I'd have to look at it, but we have to make some choices. And I'm just saying I'm an example where I could forego my Social Security because I've been successful in life. So how do we help shore up Social Security? Because too many people, they are too dependent on it. But, you know, this is the problem when we recklessly spend money and put our government finances in bad a position as they have over, and this has been going on, let's face it, for the last 15 years. It's just the last 3.5 years they put it in overdrive. I mean, let me give you some concept of how bad. During the heart of COVID.
Let's get some more questions.
Oh,
okay?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
You are correct. You are correct. I understand that there's two different kind of bills. I'm just talking that it's largely medications. There are two different kinds of medications which women can use to deal with that issue. And I'm just trying to explain the fact that when he talks about going from one state to the other state, yeah, yes. I am supportive of contraception. I have no problem with contraception.
And you're okay with free access? I mean, I think that's one of the other things she was asking. Free access, or I'm sorry, wide access to the morning after pill.
Look, that's a tricky issue. There's people that have great difficulty with that. I am supportive of that.
You're supportive
of the morning after pill.
Of access, wide access.
Of access.
Okay. All right, go ahead, ma'am, right there in the glasses.
We haven't talked about international issues. I've read that your bank has a lot of investments from foreign countries. Which foreign countries and how you nurture those relationships?
I don't have any investments by foreign countries in my bank. It's just another made-up nonsense story. Zero.
Okay. Go ahead, Ron, and then we'll go to Brandon. Brandon, I haven't forgot about you. I queued you up, so don't worry. I'm going to let you. Go ahead. Go ahead, Ron.
It's been nice seeing you again, and I've always appreciated your comments about the I wanted to talk about conservative perspective Ryan, Paul Ryan. And what Paul Ryan said was that Donald Trump was not populist, he was out, he was
I disagree with Paul Ryan. No, I do not believe so.
Okay, do you want to elaborate, or I mean,
No,
Trump is your nominee, and you're happy with your nominee. Is that it?
President Trump is a nominee. I'm supporting President Trump. Look, whether you like him personally or not, the outcomes of the policies and the performance of this country under his presidency versus Joe Biden's presidency is night and day different. Real incomes rose 7.7% under President Trump. They've declined 2.2 under President Biden. We've layered in more debt in the last 3.5 years than we did in our country's first 230 years under Joe Biden. Our border was secure under President Trump. It has been completely opened up under Joe Biden. I could continue just to walk through issue after issue. Look at foreign policy-wise. Somebody said, they wanted to talk about foreign policy, and then you ask about some investments in my bank. I have no foreign investments in my bank. But if you want to talk about foreign policy, let's talk about foreign policy. Because we have a world that is more engulfed in conflict than you would have to go back into the 60s to find anything that's even remotely comparable. We have a war in Europe with Ukraine. We have conflicts throughout the Middle East. And we have conflicts growing in the South China Sea. I mean, China and how aggressive it's gotten both with the Vietnamese and with the Philippines. So, and to me, all of that got ignited on that fateful day, and how embarrassing it was on how we withdrew from Afghanistan. I didn't have a problem ending the Afghan war, but don't you think we would have kept a very critical strategic air base that our American soldiers lost their life for? And by the way, even if we were going to leave that military base, don't you think we would have pulled out our Americans out of Kabul and the Afghan supporters that risked their lives? The damage we've done to our country and being able to execute with allies around the world cratered that day. There was a reason those Afghanis were running, holding on to those planes, falling to their lives, because they knew they were going to be immediately killed. So, we lose 13 Marines that day. We left Americans stranded. We left billions of dollars of military equipment, and off we went. And it was shortly after that, all our adversaries moved. Putin on Ukraine, the Ayatollah of Iran through their proxies, Hamas and Hezbollah on Israel, and China's gotten more and more aggressive in trying to undermine our country and more aggressive in the South China Sea. So you look at that versus, President Trump's 4 years of peace and the Abrams Accord and a number of different things. It's not even comparable on performance. So, Look, we can all get caught up in personalities. And look, he's a New York developer, and anybody that's spent any time in New York knows New Yorkers have a different personality than us Wisconsinites. I like to say we're the, Wisconsin nice. We are probably the nicest group of people. And we just have a very different style. I have a very different style than President Trump. But for me, it comes down, what are your policies, and as a business person, what results do you produce?
Okay, Brandon, to get the last question. Make it a good one. This is Brandon Molly. He's the chair of the Dane County Republican Party, one of the youngest people in the room. So anyway, go ahead. I know this is leading up to a question. Go. Okay, what would let's go with the trifecta. If Republicans get the White House and control Congress, what do you think should be the big item of the day?
There is no one big item. There are so many things that we have to do, and I really feel bad about your generation. Look, I'm in this race for two reasons. I'm very patriotic. I love my country, and I can't stand what's happening to my country. And as a father of 2 and a grandfather of 3, I understand the economic mess we have left the younger generation. The hope of every American generation has always been to leave the next generation better off. And instead, we're leaving you saddled with $35 trillion in debt, another $1 trillion growing every 4.5 months in debt. So what are we going to have to do? First and foremost, you're going to have to start figuring out this debt crisis, because it's only going to get worse, and the bouts of inflation are only going to get worse. So you've got to stop the spending. You've got to pull the spending back to 2019 levels, because we increased spending by 40%. And when we came out of the lockdowns, they kept it up, even increased it. So we got to pull that down. We have to then create pro-growth policies. Deregulation is something President Reagan did, really ended up helping, ignited the economy. So we're going to have to do things of that nature. We're going to have to fix our legal immigration system and close our southern border to stop the flow of illegal immigration. We have to get on with health care. Health care is already in crisis. It's only going to build as baby boomers go on into retirement. There are so many different issues that need to be addressed, and we have to understand the adversary that China is today, who's trying to undermine our country.
Well, Biden is basically keeping up the Trump policies on China, right?
Some Trump policies, but I think there's a lot more that could be harder, like on the issue of fentanyl. That was one of President Trump's 10 issues, and he was hammering them on the fentanyl, and that's why we started getting a little bit of a dip, and then they've relaxed that issue.
All right, so we've been over that, and we've run over time. So let's thank Eric Hovde for being here today. Really appreciate it, Eric. And speaking of staying out of debt, we want to thank our sponsors: Hush Blackwell Strategies, American Family Insurance, Excel Energy.
Back up, you're going to fall off the chase.
Well, I've done that before. Thank you. Walmart, ARP Wisconsin, Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield. That's an assist from Uncle Glenn Hovde, right? Okay, and Wisconsin Insurance Alliance, which is sponsoring the Wisconsinite video. So thanks, everybody, for coming. We'll see you here next on September 26th for a program on artificial intelligence. So thanks very much, everybody. We'll see you later.
You have been watching a production of Wisconsin Eye, your unfiltered window into legislative deliberations and public policy programming, where our mission is to provide Wisconsinites an opportunity to access the legislative process and connect with conversations that inform our citizenry. Please consider supporting our mission, and thank you for watching. Wisconsin Eye, policy made public.